Take a couple different turns with compression here. One, I want to talk about compressing a drum for balance and control. So we have a fill going into the drum beat here. So the actual groove, the snare drum's much quieter than the fill, and I'd like to have a little bit more control over that. So I inserted the BF76. Again, this is an 1176 emulation. I have a fairly slow attack because I don't want to clamp down on the transient too much. Remember that on this unit, slow is to the right and fast is to the left. And same with the release in terms of opposite intuition. So I have a fairly slow release. It does smash this quite a bit, so I might, but I'm looking to get a little bit of compression on the snare drum, but mostly to bring these down. And I still might bring this down a bit more because I don't want to smash too much. Okay, and I did basically the same thing on the under snare. So if we listen without, you can kind of hear, it still captures the recording of hitting it harder, but the volume is a little bit more contained. Okay, so remember the important thing about compressing drums is to try and have a slow enough attack that the transient isn't squashed and a fast enough release that we're not really, killing the idea of the drum or adding too much sustain to the drum that we don't want. You can play around with that and add kind of some sustain, but we'll get to transient shapers as well at some point. Now, that's if I wanted to compress, and I may compress the toms, basic gist of compressing drums. Now, taking a look at another move that's called parallel compression. And I brought this up when we looked at the Pro compressor because it has a dry-wet mix, which is essentially the opportunity of doing parallel compression without having to create an aux track. But I do, old school I suppose, like having the aux track. So what I've done here is to the right of my drums, I've created a stereo aux input track. I've assigned it a bus. I have sent all of the shells. So I'm going to show you what the difference with the overheads is, but I'm just sending the kick in, the kick out, not the sub kick. I'm not really looking to do that. The two snares and the toms. And for the most part, I sent those at unity. I'm going to show you a couple things that add some knowledge to your toolbox. So everything is at unity. Now, they are post-fader, so this mix is what is going into the sub, into the aux track. On the aux track, I've inserted the Pro compressor. I have put an 8-to-1 ratio, so kind of fairly high, a faster attack than I did on the individual drums, and a pretty medium release. Maybe I'll even slow that down and see what it sounds like. So the goal here, and the threshold is pretty low, is to squash the drums and to take away their transients. So we're going to kind of let the transient energy come from the raw track or the basic direct tracks, and here we're going to have a totally squashed drum sound, and we're going to blend it in underneath. This blending is what the dry mix knob gives us in the box itself. So first and foremost, I'm just going to press play, and I'm just listening to the drums in this case. So you can see quite a bit of compression, up to 15 at some points. And I'm going to start to bring this in. So you could say, well, aren't we just, increasing the volume? But if you listen to the sustain of the snare drum, for example, pretty short without it. But also a whole lot more body because everything's just kind of squashed together. Now, I'm going to show you something here. If you go to Options and Solo Mode, well, let's say what we can't do. So we cannot solo the drum crush and hear what this aux is being fed unless we change our solo mode to post fader or after fader. AFL, after fader listen. So this is the compressed signal. And I might say, actually, I think lowering the threshold did what I had intended. So now if I drop the overheads in, anyways, I think parallel compression is a super cool technique. I think it really gives more power to the drums. It allows you to blend, kind of a compressed sound with an uncompressed sound or a more limited compressed sound. And again, if we mute this and we say if we were to match all the settings, which I have not done, this gives us the ability to kind of, the dry is everything that's going through here unaffected, and then essentially the wet or the mix is what is. I just don't feel the control with a knob like this as opposed to a fader and the meters and everything. And that's me, okay? Have fun with it.